Now, big increases in inflation will also hit an estimated 100,000 people who've been sold homes with ground rents that are inflation linked. Now, they've not had the publicity or attention that other leaseholders who've come off badly have had, and they've not had the redress either. But just like the homeowners with the doubling ground rents and the dangerous cladding, they are stuck and potentially unable to sell. Paul Ferner's in that situation. He bought his flat in Putney in 2015. Paul, tell us about the ground rent that you have to pay then.
Yep. So as you say, I bought my flat from Taylor Wimpey in 2015. At the time, they were, during the sales process, the most friendly and helpful company that I'd ever encountered, including offering to pay for my legal fees. We'll pay for one less thing to worry about. Great. So the lawyer told me everything, looked at the lease, everything's fine, completely standard. So I didn't even see the lease until I bought the property, naively expecting a FTSE 100 company and a lawyer to, everything to be above board. And then have since obviously realised that I have this own risk clause in my lease where the ground rent, which is currently £200 a year, increases every 10 years by the RPI index.
So that increase, is that something then that puts lenders off in the same way as the doubling ground rent?
Yes, I mean, and obviously the government has introduced the leasehold reform ground rent bill, which is currently making its way through Parliament, and that's going to scrap ground rents completely. So we're going to end up in a situation where there'll be three types of leases: those with no ground rent, those with the static ground rent, and then us in the middle, the RPI ground rent, with the people who had doubling ground rent have been moved or are going to be moved to the static ground rent. So relative to a similar flat in one of the other two groups, obviously that devalues my home.
Now, I know that you bought your flat from Taylor Wimpey and you've just said that. Now, we went to them. They told us that linking the ground rent to the retail price index is an industry standard, hasn't been deemed to be unfair by the regulator in the same way as the ground rents on the houses they sold where the ground rents doubled. That was found to be unfair. What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, my experience with Taylor Wimpey, it saddens me, but it doesn't surprise me. But it's essentially gaslighting, because that leasehold reform bill on the House of Commons library, the research briefing attached to it says historically ground rents were set at a peppercorn or nominal level. However, in recent years, a practice has emerged of selling properties on long leases with higher ground rents at the start and shorter ground rent review periods. As a result, long leaseholders can quite quickly face onerous and unsustainable ground rents. High and escalating ground rents can make it difficult for leaseholders to sell or remortgage their properties. So it's not true that the chronology is they didn't have increasing ground rents as an industry. Then 10 or so years ago, they did the doubling ground rents because it just then creates value in this fictional asset that they can then trade. And then there was a furore about it. They got rid of the ground rents and then started selling as an industry ground rents with RPI escalation clauses, and they've been doing it for 8 years. So for them to now say that's established practice, they've been doing this thing, which is, the government briefing says, is a recent development. For them to say that this is established practice because they've been dragging it on for 8 or so years is churlish, really.
Let me bring Katie Kendrick in because she can give us an overview. She's from the National Leasehold Campaign. Katie, the campaign's focused on people with ground rent that doubled, and that problem has largely been fixed. Is this another one now that just needs sorting?
Yes, Winifred, this is a massive issue. We have been focusing on doubling ground rents because they by far were the worst ones in the industry, and we do welcome the CMA action on this, but it does absolutely nothing to the thousands of people who have these RPI linked leases that are going to go up and up. And as your previous callers just discussed about the increasing cost of inflation, this is really kicking the can down the road unless government do address the existing leaseholders with these RPI leases.
Paul, the answer to it would be to buy the freehold out, wouldn't it? Is that possible for you?
So, yes, and we're in that process, but obviously the existence of the RPI clause in our ground rent has increased the premium by something in the region of £250,000 for the whole estate. But really, it's the answer to all of this, as you said, the answer to all of this is getting hold of your freehold. I mean, as I say, the government have recognised this is a problem and are going to be making it illegal to have any ground rent, never mind increasing in the very near future. Really, it's another symptom of the whole leasehold freehold system. that needs to be addressed, because there's previous legislation, right to manage, collective enfranchisement, right to first refusal, all of these ways of getting the freehold, but they are difficult and painful and time consuming and expensive for leaseholders. Really what we need to do is, move to, like Scotland did, get rid of the freehold system and move to common hold like the rest of the world is really what otherwise we're just going to be playing whack-a-mole for forever. I mean, for me, I think in my experience is sadly not unusual, is that I bought my home expecting the same kind of consumer protections that I get from buying anything from a button to a car, but then find myself in this dystopian quagmire where the laws around property were developed in feudal times to protect the rights of the landed gentry against the outrageous aspirations of the pesky peasants. And there's always going to be companies or people that are going to take advantage of that unless that's resolved.
I'm going to have to stop you only because we're out of time. I'm Paul Ferner, Katie Kendrick from the National Leasehold Campaign. Thank you both. That's it for today.